Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Marge Britt, founder of Called by Love and Living Loving Legacy and all of the classes and the courses that have come out of that. And what a joy it is, what a pleasure, what a gift it is for us to come together in this network of light that surrounds the world. And I'm so just deeply, deeply moved and deeply, deeply touched that we can come together and say, hello, world. It is a beautiful, beautiful experience. And today I'm going to be speaking with someone that is very, very special, and I'm so looking forward to introducing you to her. And our theme is From Darkness and Void to Let There Be Light. So how does it happen? How does spirit, essence, the all that is, put together the pieces of this 1,000-piece puzzle that is the mystery unfolding and revealing itself as our very lives? And how does something as horrific as the 2020 pandemic impact us? All of us. How have you lived it? How have we lived it? And how is it taking us into future time? Does it connect us? Does it separate us? Does it bring us together with people that are part of the potential that is still invisible? Really important questions, and depending on where you're viewing it from, you may probably get different answers. And so I'm so looking forward to this conversation with Deborah Lindgren. And Deborah and I have both, we found out after we met, been very, very deeply committed to our spiritual journeys for most of the years of our lives. They've changed in the ways that they've shown up. They've changed in the ways that we've lived them. But the commitment to that spiritual journey has been present in both of our lives. And we didn't know each other. And somehow the universe has connected us. Is there a reason? That is a question I still hold in my awareness with sort of a curious and yet great expectation. So Deborah, I'm going to let you pronounce your last name because I'm not sure I'm even pronouncing it correctly. Come online and let me introduce you to our Called by Love community, and take a minute and tell them how you and I met in your own words.
Hi, Marge. Thanks. It's Lindgren. So you had it just about right. We met. Is it 6 months or so ago, or 9 months or so ago?
January, actually, I think, maybe.
Oh, so we're coming up on a year. Yeah, and it was at a business building event, a small event held in someone's private home, kind of like an intensive, where you gather in one room to do all the work, and then you break for meals. And I think it was during a lunch break. You and I were standing there. There were other people nearby. We were sort of having a conversation among a few of us. And I actually can't remember the first phrase that one of us uttered, but I know the name Elizabeth Clare Prophet came out, and you spun around and said, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, what do you know about her? or some such thing. And I said, well, I worked as her executive assistant for 14 years. And then we tumbled into a much lengthier conversation about the path, about the organization, about how each of our involvements in our respective organizations, what it's taught us, how we've evolved through all those trials and tribulations that come with any spiritual path, at what we're still learning, what we're still seeking. But suffice it to say that we immediately hit it off as two seekers on the path at similar levels of understanding as well as similar levels of seeking and stretching, might be another way to put it. And I'm always delighted when I meet anybody who, as I think I've mentioned to you before, Marge, can take me sort of to the edge of my understanding and beyond. Like I want to go to the frontier of spiritual awareness, at least of my own spiritual awareness, and have some pioneers come along and say, there's more, have you thought of this? Have you examined that? So when I met you, coming back to that, I felt I had met someone who can take me there, who can have conversation and insights with me that I could not have on my own. And to me, that's one of the greatest blessings, is when you meet someone who can advance your own, not only understanding, but way of being. So that's how we met, Marge, and that's how I would describe it.
And it's absolutely fascinating to me that it was in a totally secular kind of environment. It wasn't about the spiritual path, although it could include that if someone brought it in. And it was a place that I had gone because I was very, very interested in learning the very, very best ways to put together programs and design platforms on the World Wide Web. And you are a coach in that milieu now, and here you are with the same kind of spiritual yearning that I've had for all of my life, but you have stepped into this platform in ways that are even beyond where I am, and I have done lots of courses and conferences and trainings in order to learn it, and suddenly here we are, and we're having this deep spiritual conversation about someone that I had never met personally, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, but I had read so many of her books. And I'm looking at one of them that's on the top of one of my book stacks next to my bookcase, and it's on the lost years of Jesus. And then I remember another one that I read that she wrote that was about the soulmates and twin souls. And when I was going through a really deep feeling of being totally lost after the death of my beloved, whom I began to recognize as a twin soul, that I was searching to understand more about what that meant and how it worked and how it happened and potentially went beyond the visible into the invisible. And there I was in a bookstore in Sedona and found Elizabeth Clare Prophet's book on twin flames. And it's so fascinating to me how the universe seems to bring us together in ways we could have never planned, in ways that we could have never anticipated. And yet, once the connection gets made and we begin to say yes to it, mostly through dialogue or conversation or curiosity, willingness, all kinds of words we could use there, it begins to reveal itself, and it begins to show us next steps and next potentials and next ways in which the universe potentially can use us as embodied souls to bring in greater and greater levels of light. And so I knew after you and I had several conversations together that one day I wanted to invite you to be a guest on our worldwide platform. And when I spoke to you, you said yes and said that would be wonderful. And I said, what I'm really wanting us to talk about is something that is actually part of my book, Your Soul's Invisible Codes. It's the first code, but it's about darkness and void as coming before let there be light. And it's from the first chapter of Genesis in the Bible. It's about the involution of spirit as understood within the unity framework. And I said, Deborah, I would love for us, when we decided we would do this November call, and here we are in the height of the pandemic, accelerating and in all kinds of stages that have not let up. They are continuing to show us that we're not in charge. And I said, I'd like to do a call about from darkness and void to let there be light. And that sort of stunned you, and tell us why.
Well, I have a couple things I want to say. I'll do them in order. I will tell you why that created an opening for me. But first, I want to back up and say one thing so it creates a little context. When you and I met, something had to occur in order for the fuse to be lit, in order for the flame of our coming together to emerge. And that is, we both, but I already knew that you had a book on spiritual matters, but we both had to be willing to take the risk of opening up to say something that indicated we were a light seeker or a light bearer or somebody interested in a spiritual path. And I find that very often people keep that to themselves and they don't reveal who they are or what matters to them. So that point of contact is lost. The opportunity of that is lost. And the lesson for me always is, and when I met you, I was reminded of this, you never know who's next to you. You never know where you could be the light for someone, or you never know where that person could be the light for you, shining in the darkness that you're struggling with. And we must be open to, a greater awareness of who may be around us, and at the same time open to not letting our light spill out and be lost, as the Bible phrase says. You don't want to cast your pearls before swine. So we want to be mindful of where our light is going and how it's affecting people. But the reason I'm so passionate about this, Marge, and you and I have been talking about this, is I gave a talk once called I Am the Light of the World, Are You? And it's been one of my favorite talks I've ever given. It was in my capacity of leading workshops for Elizabeth's organization called the Summit Lighthouse. And it was born out of listening to a couple of news stories where somebody had saved somebody from suicide because they happened to walk by a phone that was ringing in a phone booth. I don't know if we all remember phone booths, but they had come out of a convenience store, and a phone was ringing in that phone booth. And the person was going to walk by and decided to backtrack and answer the phone. And on the other end was somebody who was ready to commit suicide but wanted to see if anybody was going to answer this phone. And the story goes that, of course, they talked him out of it and the person went on to live. But there was a moment in time where that person became the light of the world, at least the light of that person's world. And if you go back even to the Old Testament, who shall I say has sent me? Moses in the burning bush, you say, I am that I am has sent you. So, our strong belief is that the words I am mean God in me is. It's not an ego thing. It's a recognition that the power of God, the universe, lives in all of us. And that can be a declaration, I am the light of the world, to ourselves and to each other, that we're choosing to amplify light in a given situation. So I'm really passionate about this because, one of the things that I like to explore, Marge, and we've talked about this as well, is making spiritual subjects practical. Like, how does that show up in our everyday lives? Where are the opportunities to express light, to express for, higher understanding? And so to me, the phrase, let there be light, or I am the light of the world, they're the same to me, all speak to where do we bring light where there's darkness. I could go on, but I'm going to stop now so you can respond. I have more things I want to share too.
Well, I also want to point out other ways that you've said yes, because in your quest to understand all of these deeper mysteries, you, at the age of 23, were introduced or happened to meet, I don't even know how that happened, Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And she was a person that was a spiritual teacher and also led an organization, and ultimately it became an international spiritual community. And by the way, I was on a call yesterday with Alon, who happens to be from France, and I mentioned you being on the call today, and he said, I've got a commitment. I can't be on the call live. I'll listen to it afterwards. I was part of that organization when I lived in France. And he said, that was part of my spiritual path all these years ago.
Wow.
We never know. We never know. And so as your path unfolded, you left your corporate job and joined that community. And you ultimately lived there, and you worked there, and you studied there, and then you stepped into several leadership positions in the organization. You became a minister and an elder. By the way, the term elder reminds me of my own childhood, because the leaders in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where I grew up, were never called ministers. They were called elders. It's a very revered term. And you also became a member of the board of directors of that organization, serving as a teacher for the organization and traveling internationally, doing workshops and conferences and creating rituals and all kinds of amazing things. So what was your process of saying yes to all of this?
Well, I'll give you the short version. When I was sometime in my teens, and I'm uncertain if I was 14 or 16, but I was sitting in a Protestant church with my parents, our family church, sitting in the pew, and the minister was speaking. And I remember so very distinctly having the thought, can you please tell me something I don't already know? Now, it didn't make any logical sense because I couldn't have known everything he was saying, but I had the sense that there was more to the spiritual path than what I was going to get there. And so I have been what you might call a seeker ever since, looking for higher understanding, the deeper mysteries, sort of the mystical traditions of different faiths, whether that was Judaism and Kabbalah or whether it was Hinduism or Buddhism. I think at their core, all religions return to love, and the different modalities are simply different ways that we can all reach love, be the light. Same thing to me again. But, that was really my journey of wanting to know, of pushing the envelope. It was, if I'm going to use the terminology I used a little bit earlier, I wanted to find the frontier. Like, who knows more? And, I did end up meeting someone who gave me one of Elizabeth's books. It's very often how people would come into awareness of her teachings, which were preceded by her husband, by the way, Mark Prophet. And sometimes people told stories of books literally falling off the shelf when they're in bookstores, landing in their hands. So I think that there is a pulse in the universe that creates opportunities or windows for us to, open the window, step through the door to a higher level of understanding. When we take up that path, and if we do it sincerely and in a dedicated way, it becomes rigorous. And the rigor is not for everyone, is what we find out. Some people want to pursue spirituality light. Some people really want to dive in and uncover, sort of the transcendental aspects of spirituality. Jesus, I think you and I have mentioned this before, but Jesus had the upper room where he gave the higher, more esoteric teachings to those who could handle them, those who could receive them, and clearly indicating that not everything is suitable for everyone, that there is sort of a stepping stone approach to understanding, and it's not something we can grab. It's something that we undertake, and what's the best way for me to describe this? We undertake, the yearning has us launch onto our path of wanting to study, to learn, to grow, to evolve, and it comes to us one layer at a time. We don't just, unlike many of the popular ads we might see for workshops, we don't just get enlightenment in a weekend. This is rigorous study of self-examination, of looking at one's life, one's words, one's actions, of self-reflection. You and I have talked about that quite a bit. Of when you put your head down in your pillow at night, and ask yourself, did I amplify the light today, or was I lazy? Really is what it comes down to. Am I a lazy spiritual pioneer, or am I one that's alert and awake? So, like everything, there's all kinds of levels, all shades of gray in there, right? Everybody's on their own rung of the ladder, and I firmly believe this, that everybody is on their own rung of the ladder in spiritual evolution, and where they are is okay. Our job, I think, as spiritual light bearers, whatever we want to call ourselves, is to help people get to the next rung of the ladder, the next rung of understanding, the next rung of awareness, so that they can themselves become a better light into the world, or a stronger light. I don't want to get into the better than, less than, because I think we're all lights, but some of us have more batteries. Like our light shines more, might be another way to put it. So there's my story, Marge, the short version. It wasn't that short of how I got into this path of yearning. And it did lead me to the Summit Lighthouse and Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and that was a very rigorous path. And especially working for her personally for so many years, I learned a lot about myself, and I had opportunities to cleave the real from the unreal in my own consciousness. But I must say that a lot of that learning was retrospective. Some of it came years later, the understanding of what I was doing and why it was important. And the lessons are not always obvious. They only come in self-examination, and often way after the fact. And absent the self-examination, the lessons can be lost, actually. So I'll pause there for you to say the next word.
One of the things that I realize is that constantly we're in this movement between time and timelessness. We're in this movement about the human levels of awareness that can come and even get intermingled with ego kinds of development. And it's not that ego development is wrong. We all have to do it. It's part of our human experience. And yet, looking back, we can see how it's all there all of the time, always, already. And I was amazed when I Googled Elizabeth Clare Prophet and looked at her on Wikipedia and found out that she had some background in Christian Science and had actually been involved in working for them at one point in time and learned about publishing. And I thought, oh, my God, here it is, picking up all of the pieces of the puzzle, one piece at a time, learning how to fit them all together, learning how to take it into the new levels and the next stages, and all of it revealing itself. And of course, it was happening to you also. And I remember because when I was in the online group that you're a part of, that one of the things that you taught at one point was related to that ladder. And talk a little bit about how you shifted a spiritual teaching into a corporate setting.
Well, you know, that's a good one. I just taught it again recently, actually, with a group of students. If we're all on the phone, so we don't have any visuals, but just imagine a ladder with many rungs, like the old-fashioned wooden ladder is a better image. And mark an X on one of the rungs of the ladder, and that's where we are. That's where we are in consciousness. That's where we are in awareness and spiritual evolution. And those who are above us on the ladder are our teachers, our mentors, those who see something we can't yet see, who come back down the ladder a few rungs to share what they know, their wisdom, their visions, their understanding. And they help us rise up the ladder. Likewise, there are people on rungs of the ladder below us who could benefit from what we know. And so we go back down the ladder, or we stay in the ladder actually, and share what we know, our experiences, our understandings with them. And likewise, they can now climb a little bit higher on the ladder. So we're all on this moving ladder of spiritual evolution. That's the spiritual one. Translating that to business, you take yourself, you put the X on the ladder where you are. You have certain skills and talents and expertise. You may have had specialized training, experiences with clients or in the business world, and that all taken together makes you capable and educated, and whatever other words you might want to use, to help those who are not yet at that level of understanding in business. So let's say you're a marketing expert. Well, there's people below you on the ladder who don't know what you know in marketing, so you can help them. You can have a class for them. You can take on one-on-one clients and help them with their marketing so that they too can climb up the ladder. I would consider myself to be at a certain station of the ladder in marketing, for example, but there are people who are way better than I am, and they would become my teachers, right? I would look to them to learn new things, or what's the latest, or what's going on there, so I can apply it to my own business opportunities. So we're always on this ladder, which you can look at it from a spiritual point of view, you can look at it from a business point of view, and just because we're on one rung of the ladder in business, it doesn't mean that that's the rung we're on for everything. Like we can be on multiple rungs of one rung of multiple ladders. It's all different on different ladders. We might have a certain attainment in relationships. We might have a certain attainment in working with children. We might have a certain attainment in the business world. We might have a certain attainment as a parent. We might have a certain attainment in terms of teaching, or you know what I'm saying? So we're not just on one rung of one ladder. It's a multidimensional tool for, thinking of the ladder. It's a way to examine one's life and say, okay, let's look at where I am on the ladder with respect to my personal relationships. How am I doing with them? Am I creating opportunities in my personal relationships, where I can amplify the light of others, where I can help them climb up another rung of the ladder? Or am I being critical, sarcastic, ignoring them maybe, doing things that don't help them climb the rung of the ladder, but may actually be causing them to doubt themselves, to pull away, to walk back down the ladder? So this process, we're coming back to self-examination. When we think of Let There Be Light, we want to look at our role in helping people climb up the ladder of light. If you want to, it's a ladder of life, I called it, but it's the same thing. Are we helping people in our relationships evolve? Are we shining the light so that they can have a better image of themselves and choose to climb higher, to strive, to yearn, to know more? Or is our behavior with them, and Thanksgiving's coming up, and there's the proverbial, who's the uncle that everybody doesn't want to see at Thanksgiving because he always has the ornery conversations. Well, if we're going to be the light for that uncle, what does that conversation look like? That's really something to think about. Sometimes it's good to think about these things ahead of time so we don't get caught off guard, and then we get dragged down into a conversation where, like the old quote says, never argue with a fool because those watching won't know the difference. And so we get pulled into conversations that are more ego-driven and not elevated up the ladder. So I'm kind of gone off on a tangent a little bit there, but my main point here to bring it full circle is self-examination. Where am I in my relationships? Where am I in my career? Where am I in my spiritual understanding? Where am I as a parent? Where could I, where could I elevate myself? Where is there opportunity to grow? And who do I need to seek? What do I need to read? Who do I need to be in conversation with in order to grow and evolve there? And it all comes back to self-examination. And if we don't have a process for self-examination, it's very hard to grow. It's very hard for the leopard to change its spots. People don't change much in their lifetime without some kind of spiritual intercession, without some kind of light coming in.
That's beautiful, Deborah. Thank you so much. It's amazing how we have different ladders in our own lifetime. And we'll be on one ladder in one area of our life. We'll be on another ladder in different areas of our life. And if we try to transfer our skills, sometimes we can. Other times we need to learn new skills for the different ladders. So what an amazing kind of journey we're on. All of the complexities, all of the possibilities, all of the interesting ways that life unfolds in this experience of living on the human plane. And so I want to go back to another theme that I mentioned in the reminder email, and I simply ask a question: is it light upon light? And I want to bring in something that happened in my own awareness. When I came to the ministry at Unity in Tustin in 1993, and I had lived with this yearning that was such a deep, deep, deep spiritual yearning for all of the years of my life. It took me into many different pathways, adventures. One of those pathways and adventures was going to New York and working for the Feminist Press for a year with a Rockefeller grant, funding that. And that pathway took me to going to the University of Massachusetts and beginning my doctoral studies in curriculum and psychological education and counseling. But there was the pathway then that happened totally another completely different pathway in some ways, because it became a profession, and that was ministry. And more rungs of a ladder. I could take skills that I'd learned from other areas of my life, like Elizabeth Clare Prophet did from working in publishing with Christian Science, and apply them into where I was in now a new ladder that was a new profession, and had to go back to school for 3 years. And in order to become an ordained minister, I never thought I would do that, ever. I thought a doctoral degree was the end of my education and had no desire to ever sit in another classroom. And suddenly here, Spirit was saying, there's more. This. And some of the things I'd learned, I had to sort of set on the side burner under the guidance of Spirit in order to learn the new things that were going to be given to me during this new experience of learning. Well, the same thing happened when I came to Unity of Tustin. And one of the yearnings led me to a spiritual teacher. And his name was Llewellyn Vaughan Lee. He was a Sufi mystic. And as I listened to some of his tapes and talks and read some of his work, I listened to a meditation and a prayer that he gave as a talk one time, and I think it was in 1994, and it was called Light Upon Light, and it was his concept of how light works. And what he talked about is that there are lights which ascend and lights which descend, and that the ascending lights are the lights of love. They're the lights of the heart. And the descending lights are the lights that come from Spirit. He called it the throne, the all that is. I would call it now the essence of the all that is. That the ego, which is a lower self, is actually a veil between Spirit and love, between the throne and the heart. And when the veil is rent, and that's a story, of course, in coming from Scripture, that the veil is rent, that then a door opens. It's a door in the heart. And like springs toward like. In Unity common language now, we call it like attracts like. And what happens is that light rises through love in the heart towards the light of Spirit, and the light of Spirit comes down upon the light of love, and it's light upon light. And every time, and this is what was so beautiful, every time our heart sighs for love, for Spirit, Spirit sighs for us. Every time we yearn for love, every time we yearn for Spirit, Spirit yearns for us. And so that yearning creates the meeting. And each time a light rises from you, a light comes down towards you. And that is the living flame of love. It's a flame rising from you that is meant with a corresponding flame of love that comes down towards you. And that awareness of Llewellyn Vaughan Lee has absolutely lived in me ever since I first heard him teach it in 1994. And it was leading me, guiding me, directing me all of the years that the Campus of Consciousness was evolving, and I was meeting and having dialogues with teachers that I didn't even know. I would attend places like conferences, much like I attended the business conference where you and I met. And my memory is a little different than yours, and that I remember the first time we talked being when I was sitting alone on a picnic bench in the backyard during the lunch break, and not knowing anyone because I'd gone by myself to that event. And you came over, and there was an empty place beside me, and you asked me if it was empty, and I said yes, and invited you to sit down. And we had our first conversation. I didn't know that within 2 or 3 hours of that time in a working exercise in the big room, that the person directing the event would invite you to go to another room with me and work on something and put it into some language that would refine it in ways that she understood could be beneficial, ways that I hadn't put into words yet. Do you remember that, Deborah?
Oh, yeah, I do. And I remember the picnic table. I think when I was sharing, I was remembering our second conversation in the kitchen. But yes, I do remember now, so they're both correct. It's just, yeah, I do.
And so there will often be multiple conversations when Spirit begins to bring together these lights. And the process of light upon light begins to happen. How do you shed light on light? Or how do you shine the light on the darkness? And maybe it's not just about an understanding of a darkness in the ways that we recognize it, but it's a cycling, a spiraling in time of the way that darkness and light is interrelated in much the same way as evening and morning are interrelated in the definitions of the codes of creation in my book, but also in the first chapter of Genesis. So it's really, really interesting when we begin to realize how intricately connected we are in this realm called life on the human plane, and yet ultimately we're part of a oneness that we probably don't even understand yet. And what I know is that I'm in my early 80s now, and I'm still learning. I have learned more in the last 5 years of my life about the rare gifts of the stages than I ever knew when I was teaching on the platform. It's stunning to me that I'm still in such an accelerated learning curve. And I'm wondering if possibly we are called in ways that we cannot understand and have never thought of ourselves and might even resist because of the experience of the shift in consciousness that seems to be happening. And that 2020 has added a cosmic dimension to it. And it's even been called the shift of the ages. Is it about light upon light? And is it about shining light on the darkness? And if it is, can we do it? And how do we do it? Any thoughts on that, Deborah?
Oh, what a leading question, Marge. Yes, of course I have thoughts on that. And, as you were talking about the light upon light and the figure eight flow of, as above, so below, light coming down, light going back, I was reminded of, I don't know if you did this, but there may be some people on the call who did this. When we were younger, we used to take album covers. Remember albums? And we'd line them with aluminum. We'd cover them with aluminum foil, and we'd sit out in the yard and direct them towards the sun so that sun would come down and give us a tan. I don't know if anybody else did that, but that was all the rage in the 60s and 70s, right, where you use those album covers because you wanted more light. So the analogy is we must open our heart and be receptive to and be seeking, using our free will to seek that light in order for it to descend. It's not just going to come and hit the ground next to us, right? We must have the apparatus, which is our hearts, our yearning, in order to receive that light. You know, we have to be a supplicant for that light, right? I mean, there is light flowing all the time. It's a great Antakarana as we're all connected as one. But in terms of our own, figure eight flow with the divine, we have to have the window open, the album cover open with aluminum foil to receive that light, right? And then the next step is, okay, what do I do with that light? How do I use my light? Let's look at 2020 and COVID. And I was meditating on this morning, and I thought, we have three choices, all of us. One, and we'll all know people in these three categories. One, we complain. We complain constantly. We're afraid, we complain, we buy extra toilet paper we don't need. We are just constantly, and the political process in the United States just exacerbated this, but we're always looking for what's wrong, how it's not going to work. So you have that camp, that group of people, right? They operate from fear and lower levels of understanding. Then you have the people in camp number two, I'm just giving them random numbers, who just do nothing. They bury their head in the sand. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to know about it. Don't share anything about it with them. They're happy just where they are, right? So they don't want to exert themselves in any way. Then you have camp three. These are the people who understand that there is a shift going on, that there are openings for a greater expansion, and that maybe this is the great opportunity instead of the great suffering, where we have windows open, opportunities to draw down greater light, to amplify that light. Through self-examination, look for opportunities where we can amplify others' light, like how am I doing in my relationship with so-and-so? Where might I be able to volunteer my time to share my wisdom or to share just my physical time at a food bank, for example? How am I utilizing the light that I'm open to receiving? What's it for? It's certainly not for my own spiritual self-aggrandizement to just sit on a hill somewhere and go, look at all the light I have. That is not the nature of light. The nature of light is to illumine, right? So if we look at 2020 and the pandemic as a darkness, how are we being a light in this world? How are we furthering the evolution of consciousness for others, helping them in their own understanding, pulling them out of their own darkness so they can come up a couple of rungs on the ladder of their own spiritual evolution? And to me, the very definition of a light worker or a light bearer or someone who's amplifying light is how we help elevate others. The world is not served by denigrating others, by harping on their darkness through criticism or condemnation or take it one step further to judgment. The world is not served, is not elevated. And I do want to do a sidebar distinction here, which we always, as spiritual workers, leaders, evolutionaries, want to be able to cleave the real from the unreal in our understanding, to know what is light and what is darkness. And what I'm talking about here is the judgment that automatically labels people as this or that doesn't allow for gradations. It's kind of like the old saying of if you walk in someone else's moccasins, you truly understand their situation. So do we take the time to listen, to really understand what it's like in their moccasins, so that we can offer bread upon the waters, so that we can be a light for them and just elevate them maybe half a rung, maybe just to raise their arm to reach for the next rung. You know, no one was ever hurt by giving them a positive spin. No one was ever hurt by genuine caring and concern and sharing of love. I don't think it's ever been destructive. That's just my opinion. But, you know, in terms of anchoring light and being a light worker, amplifying light, I am the light of the world, are you, all the phrases that we've used so far, we think of ourselves as part of the great, you said World Wide Web at the very beginning, Marge, which reminded me of the Antakarana of light. So imagine all the connections that are made by Google every day around the world. We have the opportunity to create that same thing on a spiritual level. We're all connected by the lights in our hearts. Some are dimmer than others. Some are brighter than others. But why not take the role of being the light amplifier, you know, the light bearer, the one who's helping people understand and to come up a little bit higher? And to me, that is our mission. You know, that is what each of us are set out to do. And whether it's through writing or being a musician and sharing beautiful music, whether it's helping a child or an elderly person, you know, with something that they need, this is the path. That's what the path's all about. And at the end of the day, through self-examination, we can say, how did I use my light today? Where did I serve? Where did I give someone a positive spin? How did I amplify so-and-so's understanding? How did I amplify my own understanding? You know, where have I risen? Where do I need to pay more attention? You know, you remarked, Marge, about you never thought you'd go back to school. And so this is true for most of us. We think we're done with something, and then lo and behold, something comes along. We're not done. And I always go back to the famous quote by John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach at UCLA. I think it was UCLA, not USC, University of California, Los Angeles. He had a losing team that he brought to being champions for 4 or 5 years in a row. One of his most famous quotes is, "It's what you learn after you know it all that counts."
I love that. You know, as I was sitting listening to your talk, my eyes just went over the top of my computer to my bookshelves again. And I looked at one of the books there that was important and very, very important in my life in the early days of ministry when I was at Walnut Creek, Unity in Walnut Creek, and it was the book was called The Seat of the Soul. And when it first came out, I taught it and did a talk on it, and then followed that up with a 7 or 8 week class, or how I always would do about a chapter a week and develop experiential learning. And of course, it was written by Gary Zukav. And later I met him several times because he was involved in conferences where I was attending. And interestingly, when he published his anniversary edition or whatever it was called, he sent me a copy of the book and at Unity of Tustin, and then I was listening to him recently, and this is how we keep upgrading our own awareness and our own teaching. And he was being interviewed on a show that I listened to on the web, and he was talking about the new book that he's writing now and that will be published in 2021. And he said one of the chapters in the new book is about the miracle of COVID. I can't remember if he called it COVID or if he called it pandemic or if he called it simply 2020. But in the dialogue, and this is going to be one of the chapters of my new book, The Miracle of COVID. And how many times can we take something that is immediate in our own lives, something that is potentially painful in our own lives, and see it through the eyes of love? See it through the eyes of let there be light. See it through the eyes of, oh my God, everything stopped. Everyone was told to go to their room. Everyone went through their own experiences of lockdown or loss or shift as required in a worldwide kind of experience that was going to and is shifting everything. There will be no going back to the way it was. There will be no getting back to normal. Everything is in the process of shift. And I absolutely loved that awareness that we are in the process. The world is in a process of shift. And we're going through, whether we want to or not, whether we like it or not, we're going through a shift in stages of consciousness. And we are moving through the awareness of when we can judge and see objects and judge them, to when simply everything goes beyond that. And all of the kinds of things that we observe simply become objects that come up, and they're going to give us new words. They're going to move us into new levels of boundaries or boundlessness. And we're going to shift to being able to witness that. And it's a place on the map where we've never been before. And it's moving us into ultimately no time and no boundaries. And it's completely different than anything that we've lived. And will we be willing to open our hearts and hold all of the thing, everything? Hold everything. And then begin to see the building blocks that are held within it, the pieces of the puzzle that are held within it, and how they begin to fit together in a collective that is about the whole universe. It's something we've never lived before. And for me, I'm beginning to get the glimpse of some of the ways that it's going to show up, where involution is happening in our lives. And it's all within us. And it's also part of the timeless, boundless. And it's absolutely still, even as it dissolves and gives birth. So that moves me to the awareness of I am that, you are that, we are that, we're all of it. And how do we work together? How do we collaborate? How do we let the universe guide us? And how do we let the universe arrange what the universe is planning? That's not even a good way to say it. The way that I've referred to it for many years without understanding it, is God's plan. How do I accept God's plan as the one function that I would fulfill when I don't even understand what it is? So back to you, Deborah.
Are you going to leave me on the precipice there, Marge? Yeah. You give me the big question and go, here, you take it. You know, I think there's a couple of things going on here. First one is, you know, both Jesus and Buddha had to get out of Dodge to reach higher understanding, right? They had to go leave their everyday life, go into the wilderness of sorts. You know, Buddha left the castle walls and went out into the wilderness and became a wandering monk and ultimately had his enlightenment. And Jesus had to leave and to get away from the fray. In a sense, we're all in the wilderness here now. Our everyday life, what used to drive us, our habits, our routines, have all been disrupted. We are now in the wilderness. And is it our opportunity, I'll answer your question with a question, is it our opportunity to reflect spiritually, to make decisions spiritually as to how we want to be moving forward? Not, quote, going back to normal. Like you said, normal is such a funny word anyway. There is no normal. Who's normal? Do you know anyone who's normal? I don't. So that's a funny phrase in and of itself, but we all use it. No, let's not go back to normal. Let's move forward to new horizons. So to answer your question, each one of us must make the decision that, yes, I am moving forward to new horizons. I'm not pining for water that's already gone over the dam. I am looking forward with open eyes, open arms, and most importantly, an open heart to say, what is my new role? How has this miracle manifested itself in my life? To use Gary Zukauf's, the pandemic has been a miracle. It's created a huge opening for each of us to go into the wilderness to seek higher understanding and our role in not only our own evolution, but the world's spiritual evolution. Some of us will be players at a more limited level. Some of us will be teachers, expanding awareness for large groups. And some of us will be the visionaries, the ones who can see the vastness and describe it in a way that makes it relevant and manageable for others. So, it depends where we are in the great scheme of things, right? In terms of, again, being on the ladder. Some will be the visionaries, some will be the thought leaders, some will be the teachers, some will be the amplifiers, and some will just be working in their neighborhoods. It's just, and there's no right or wrong there. There's not one that's better than or less than another. It's just that we all have our spiritual roles. And the miracle to me is I have the opportunity to be quiet, to be alone more than ever before. It's like when there was a time when in the organization with Elizabeth where we were preparing for the eventuality of calamity, worldwide calamity, and we had packed all these things away, and most of us sitting in empty rooms. And the message that came forth was, now that you have nothing to distract you, not even a painting on the wall, nothing, what do you think about? How do you go within? And through prayer, through supplication, through meditation, through chanting, whatever your modality is, come up higher to greater realizations, to take the time in the quiet to really reflect, to really know. Because in the busyness of our previous, quote-unquote, normal, everyday life, perhaps we didn't have those opportunities or didn't take them. But now, the miracle, as this is my definition now based on what you said of Gary Zukauf, perhaps the miracle is that we've all had this opening for further reflection in our own wilderness, the wilderness of the world, to use that metaphor, to say, where do we go from here? How do we expand the light on the planet? How do we bring in greater love, greater evolving up the ladder? What is our role in that? You know, we can be a lazy spiritual person that doesn't take any action, or is afraid to take action, hiding the light under the bushel. Or we can say, you know what, I understand my role, and today I am going.
That is beautiful. Did I lose someone?
Oh, that's such a beautiful conversation. I think Deborah might have left us by mistake or technology, but we are here. Let's see. Melanie, can you confirm you can still hear us too? Hopefully we didn't lose the whole group.
Nope, I'm here.
Perfect. All right, then Deborah will find her way back. What a beautiful conversation.
Amazing. Well, one of the things that I wanted us to do is to really think about where we are now. And I was thinking about one of the calls that I listened to not long ago, actually by a world renowned. He received an international award in India recently. Astrologer who said, and I love this quote, we are exactly on schedule for what the cosmos has in store. And that is a mind-blowing quote. His name actually was Rick Levine, and I love that quote. What does it mean if we think of it in those terms? We are exactly on schedule for what the cosmos has in store. And he was talking about the month of November, the month we're in, and he was talking about the kinds of energies that the cosmos is showing up with, and the emotional energies, and the need for patience, and the kinds of experiences that we have that are like mystery, and some of the feelings of expansiveness, and some of the feelings of hidden things being revealed, and deep secrets, and some of our own feelings of impatience, and yet wanting to move forward, and that involving pent-up tension and frustration, and sometimes we're moving into restraint, and sometimes we are experiencing unrest. And then, while all of this is going on, simultaneously, there is an experience of planting seeds. We're planting seeds. It's a period for seed planting, for deep transformation. And parts of us, as we experience the seed planting, wants to fight it, and part of us goes into stress, and another part of us says, take a deep breath, and another part says, collaborate. And what's happening now often in our lives is we're getting some real strength. We're beginning to feel authorship of our own self, our own highest self. We're beginning to align ourselves and get an integrity with that. And what begins to happen, and I know that you can begin to experience some of this now, is that new ideas are beginning to drop in. New ideas are beginning to seed themselves in your awareness. And you're beginning to have dialogues. You're listening to one, or Deborah and I notice she's back. Thank God, Deborah, you're back. and and I notice that Deborah and I are in this kind of dialogue. We're talking about focusing on new ways that potentially we have never seen before, or potentially the world has never seen before. And then we're going to be asking ourselves, and maybe even today we're asking ourselves, how are we going to change? How is this energy going to move forward in my own life and in the world? And we'll still, if you're like me, experience some of my impulsive nature. I think I was born with that. And sometimes I have to take a deep breath and pause and invite Spirit to simply come in, breathe in love, breathe out love. Because this isn't just a short journey, this is a long-distance journey. And what we're going toward in the rest of this year and going into December, which is about the birth of the Christ essence, as we celebrate the stories of Christmas and celebrate the time of Thanksgiving even this month, we're talking about celebrating the expanding of our vision. And it's a vision that will not be impeded. Why? Because it's not directed by our ego selves. It is being directed by consciousness. It's being directed by the essence of the all that is. It's being directed by Spirit. It's being seated in our very souls. And it involves death and rebirth. Just like in the fall, the leaves begin to turn colors, and then they drop to the ground. And in the spring, there's new birth. And so we're going to be receiving in just the days ahead, the weeks ahead, and the months ahead, a new vision. And we're going to be setting new intentions. And Thanksgiving is very much a holiday that can be about celebrating and giving thanks for these new ideas, this new promise, and these new seeds of hope. What would it be like if we gathered around the Thanksgiving table this year, whether it's virtually or whether it's with a small group in the intimacy of our own home? And we talked about the things we're thankful for, past, present, and future, all as one. What I see for myself is that future involves research, and it also involves imagination, and it involves deeply working together. It brings into my mind John Lennon's song, Imagine. It brings into my mind imagining what is possible. Dreams and hopes and flowing in this essence of the all that is. Flowing. Not all at once, but one step at a time, one rung on the ladder at a time, but understanding all of the ladder as necessary, all of the ladder as important. You can't have the top rungs of the ladder without the bottom of the ladder. And we're all part of it. It's all within us. And we're going to be attracted to the parts that are part of our life and love. And we will be differentiating between the parts that are of our higher self and the parts that are of our human self. And yet, our human self is going to become a body of light and embody all of it. It's about working together. And it's about grounding and encouraging, even as we move into and experience the unimaginable. And we only have about 15 minutes left, and I'd love to have people be able to raise their hands. But before we do that, let's just take a moment of silence and let everyone just experience the willingness to open into the question, what is the miracle for me? What is being seated in my heart that will be part of light upon light? How am I being invited to live love? To be the living flame of love in my very own life. And let's go into the silence for 1 minute and see what word may come in the silence. In the silence. Word or words or phrases. Back. Melanie, tell people how they could raise their hands.
All right. For those that have called in, press *2 on your phone now. For those that are attending via the webcast, type your comment in the box on the page and click the submit button. Those will be printed off and read by Marge and responded to on your behalf. *2 for the phone, type your comment, click submit for others. Thank you.
And I'm not seeing any hands up yet. So, Deborah, let me pass it back to you. We lost you for a few minutes.
Well, back to this idea of the pandemic and what a year it's been. I've heard this, what I'm about to say, in a business context, and I was just thinking it translates beautiful to the spiritual context. So it's the decision we all have to make, and sometimes it's made 100 times a day, depending on our circumstances. But are things happening to me or for me? Sometimes when we take the position that things just happen to me, we can end up turning ourselves into a victim, like we have no recourse, like there's no way out of it. And I think this is perhaps the position that many have taken with respect to the pandemic. It's happening to us. Or, as Gary Zukav might say, is it happening for us? And like you just so beautifully expressed, Marge, if it's happening for us, what opportunity is it creating? What window or door is being opened? And how are we meant to walk through it, look through it? What is it all for? For ourselves personally, for our families, our communities, and then on a world scale. What's it all for? So the lens of our consciousness shifts depending on whether we decide, and free will is paramount here. Even if we're unconscious, it's still free will, depending on whether we decide it's happening to me or for me, to us or for us. That changes everything.
That reminds me also of Michael Beckwith's stages, and I've taught them for years. Unity of Tustin was actually built through the visioning method that Michael Beckwith teaches, and he's actually been to the campus of Unity of Tustin. And Michael talks about, actually I taught it as 4 stages. To me, that's the victim stage. And his second stage is interesting. He calls it by me. And that's when our ego often can kick in, and we think we're doing it all. And we think we're in charge. I used to think about it in terms of a bicycle built for 2. And the third stage that Michael talks about is through me. And on that bicycle built for 2, in the by me stage, you found the bicycle, but you put yourself on the front seat. And in the third stage, you somehow decide God could help you out. And you start praying and you start working with some spiritual ideas. And that's a through me stage. But you've got God on the back seat of the bicycle. And you still think you're in charge. You still think you're controlling things. There's a final stage that is as me. As me. To me, by me, through me, and as me. And when as me happens, you put God on the front of the bicycle built for 2, and you put yourself in the back seat. And what you find out is God is guiding it, God is directing it, Spirit is handling it. It's all unfolding exactly as it should be, and you are on the back seat pedaling as fast as you can, trying to keep up with all of it. And so I think that may be part of what we're experiencing now. And Fabian, what I'd love for you to do, since we don't have any hands raised right now, is come online and come in, and you can share.
Thank you. What a beautiful and powerful dialogue with the two of you. I feel like maybe the others are also taking all this dialogue in, but just as a reminder, if anybody, although we are getting short on time, but start 2 is to come on the line and or to write up your comment, and then we can pass them on, or questions. So what came up for me during the minute of silence was trust, be willing to be seen, felt, and heard, risk taken when led by following your heart, and soul nudges are for the highest good, opportunities for growth. That's what I got.
Yeah.
And there are also a couple of things I wanted to mention as we are getting on the journey to Thanksgiving, and I already wanted to express my gratitude for of course, you, Marge, and these opportunities to be together every month, and Deborah for joining us this month, everybody who is joining live or on the replay, and Melanie, I mentioned to you earlier, but I have a lot of joy having you back with us, and I'm just so grateful that you feel better and are back with us. And I also wanted to bring awareness that we are still functioning completely as, all of our events have been on love donations, which when we receive them, it allows us to continue with the platforms. We have ITS, we have the Zoom, we have other things. So there are still costs involved. So if you find value and would like us to continue, it's also with the awareness of Giving Tuesday coming up on December 1st, a great time to remember if you wanted to do a donation. You have the link to the PayPal was on the email invitation. There is also an address where you can send a check, or Rick and Lisa put also information on the website. If you have any trouble with that, let me know. And then to close with my announcements, just also if you save the dates that were mentioned in the email, the next call with Craig Phillips being the guest will be with Marge and Craig's in dialogue on December 16th. And then we also, for the last couple of months, started to do dream work every month with David Jonathan, the way we used to do when we were meeting in person. And the next dream work is Friday, December 18, and there is a link to respond to that on the email that was sent. And for the regular call, as long as you're on our email list, you'll receive the information. But for the dream work, you need to specifically respond. I think that's what I wanted to share, Marge.
Oh, thank you, Fabienne. And what a blessing you are for Called by Love, and also in my life. It's been incredible to be in the flow of all of the unexpected relative to 2020, and to see it continuing to reveal itself. And as you brought a note into me, I turned it over to see what was on the opposite side, because I noticed it looked like there was color. And and the piece of paper you handed me says, Taurus full moon. Taurus is Fabienne's birth sign. And the Taurus full moon was with Uranus this year, or Uranus, and it says, slow down to speed up, find your still point. It's about light body activation and bringing your light down to earth.
Oh, my goodness. That's perfect. Boomerang. Finishing the loop of the circle. Well, beautiful. Thank you for that addition. And I'll let you and Deborah close up, unless, Melanie, you have anything you'd like to share with us.
I am just so grateful to be here.
We're so grateful you are here.
Thank you. I just can't believe we're towards the end of the year again. And I have just so truly enjoyed being a part of Called by Love Institute, and just really looking forward to next year and just seeing and hearing about all of these new possibilities open to all of us. And as we're approaching Thanksgiving, I would just like to say to everybody as part of the Call by Love family that I just pray that all of you are healthy and safe and that we can see our blessings even when they may not be so obvious. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
And Melanie, I just want to express my gratitude for you in my life. And you are an example of exactly what we've been talking about today. You were George Cow's virtual assistant, and I signed up for a course with him now many years ago, 7 or 8 years ago probably, maybe 9, 10. And you called me and said, you're supposed to be in a mastermind group. And I noticed you haven't signed up for one. And I said, oh, yeah, I meant to do that, but I haven't gotten it done yet. So ask yourself, what have you not gotten done? And what is someone inviting you to do? Melanie was calling to invite me to act upon that requirement. Within a few months, not only had Melanie and I become mastermind partners, we also were involved in Melanie supporting me, teaching me, showing me how to put together the platform that would create Living Loving Legacy. We are part of each other's lives for a purpose.
Deeply.
And so ask yourself, who in your life is there because the connection with that person is about a greater purpose that Spirit is inviting you into. And so thank you so much, Deborah, for being with us today. What a joy it was to share with you. I'm so grateful for you in my life also. And
thanks, Marge. The feeling's mutual. Trust me. You're one of those people that I feel fortunate to have that pushes my level of understanding, that keeps me on the spiritual frontier, so to speak. And it's really, thank you for having me. I feel honored and blessed to spend this time with you and grateful to have the opportunity. So thank you for that. And to everyone listening, ultimately it's a question. We all ask ourselves every day. You put it that way, Marge. Who am I meant to be with? What opportunities are before me? Just always keeping an open heart. I think that's like my metaphor of the album cover with the tinfoil. Is my heart open? And am I open to receiving opportunities and light in whatever form it's coming?
Light upon light. Yep. Oh, it's so wonderful. And so let's take a moment as we begin to close the call and listen together to Liebestrom, Dream of Love, and ask what your dream of love is.